Hey everyone, hope everyone's doing okay and staying safe. Slightly overdue video, and of course with the release of Windows 11 pretty imminent in the next few weeks, this video might be a little bit outdated, but something I was really looking forward to doing, but unfortunately it took me some time to even get my hands on this particular CPU in this video, the Ryzen 5900X or even the 5950X. So, wanted to actually see, just for old time's sake, wink, if Windows 7 can be installed on a 5900X CPU with an X570 based chipset motherboard. Very similar to some other videos I've done, including a fairly recent one, getting Windows 7 to work on a B550 chipset motherboard, which is absolutely possible, though a little troublesome. Definitely a little more troublesome than the last two generations of Ryzen CPUs and chipset motherboards and whatnot. But it's definitely possible over here using pretty much the similar, almost to the same method. You can see here I already have the Windows 7, basically the initial window you see just after setup is completed and all those files are installed and copied over, etc., etc. So I did actually skip a little bit of a step here, but I'll absolutely go ahead and explain you that process. Basically, I went ahead and took the intended hard drive here, in this case just a small 160, 180 gigabyte SSD, plug it into another computer, most likely a legacy computer that basically will not have any issues with USB. Over here is I go ahead and pull over my trusty wireless keyboard and mouse trackpad combo. You see nothing is working. And that's basically going to be the story. If you try to install Windows 7 on these particular motherboards, you're just going to have an issue where none of the USB ports are recognizing anything connected to it. There's a couple of steps to bypass this. One would be to actually have a USB 2.0 based add-in card, an expansion card that you can actually just install. Since most motherboards these days do not have regular PCI slots, you'll probably have to get one that has like a PCIe X1 or X4 slot, very likely going to be an X1. That's definitely one way to do it. Another way, very similar, would be to actually get an expansion card with PS2 slots, in this case both for keyboard and mouse, and obviously a PS2 keyboard and mouse. There is also the option to get an adapter that obviously does split the PS2 port to connect a USB mouse. I believe that should work as well too, though it's not something I've actually tried. And I actually do have a couple of those adapters, so I should probably just answer that question for you guys before the video ends. Why not? I'll definitely give that a shot. But the method I actually decided to choose here is to actually install Windows 7 on a legacy computer that doesn't have an issue with USB ports and doesn't really have an issue with Windows 7, so even using first generation Ryzen CPUs will work perfectly just fine. Getting it installed and then taking, right after the installation reaches this point right here, as you see, just basically rip the hard drive out, plug it into the intended computer, in this case a X570 motherboard with a 5900X CPU. So here we are, right over here, but obviously how do I get things to work? Good news is this particular motherboard does have a PS2 slot, so I do have a PS2 mouse plugged in, and you can see it's actually working right now. So what I'm actually going to go ahead and do here is, let's see here, click on this little icon for accessibility. I'm going to go ahead and turn on the screen keyboard right over here. On screen keyboard, poof, here we go. So once this is over here, I'm going to go ahead and close this window here. And just because I don't have a PS2 keyboard here, so I can't type anything in, but I do have mouse capability, I can go ahead and just start typing in anything over here. I'm just going to name this silence, as I usually do. If you do have a PS2 keyboard here, you can feel free to go ahead and use it. You may find it actually would be a little easier to, if you had to choose between the two of them, to actually use a mouse as opposed to your keyboard. But if you're actually really good with keyboard shortcuts, then by all means, go ahead and do that. Asking me for your password here, so I'm just going to click on next. And I'm just going to do the default setup here right now. I'm not going to do anything here. I'll leave it on Pacific time. No big deal. And this should be pretty much a straightaway process right over here. Get to the desktop. Might actually reboot once or twice. No big deal there as well. Looks like the computer did actually reboot, which is pretty common after initial setup. So here we are again. Resolution here is really low. I'm just going to go ahead and change it to a better resolution here. I'm just going to minimize this a little bit. Get it up to the maximum here. What a pain using this keyboard. All right, went ahead and changed the resolution. Obviously, unfortunately now none of the USB ports are still working here. So following this particular method, I'm going to go ahead and actually shut down this computer and move the hard drive over one more time to the previous computer, copy over some important files that are mentioned in the description below here, and get this thing up and running by installing some drivers. Alright, so I've replugged my SSD back into the main computer here, and I went ahead and copied over a couple of files. Created this little folder called setup, and inside I created a folder called Ryzen 5000. So you see a couple of files here, and I'll go ahead and demonstrate them to you. One of them is the customized USB drivers, along with some other drivers over here that can be really useful to you, including basically network adapters, storage adapters, etc. as well. This is your chipset driver, downloaded intended for the X570 chipset based motherboard. There is an official download for that under AMD's website for Windows 7, so I went ahead and downloaded that. Also have this C++ installation over here, and I'll definitely mention that in a little bit. Very important, your Windows 7 Sp1 installation file. That one hotfix for Windows 7 that I mentioned in the description as well. And of course, a little file here that basically knocks out the CPU restriction that Windows 7, that Microsoft basically put on Windows 7 some time back for future CPU. So let's go ahead and run Windows Sp1 installation. This probably will take a little while, but maybe not too long considering this computer is going to be pretty fast. You see here the installation, and let's go ahead and get it ready and get this ready to go. While this installation is actually going on, go ahead and give you a little bit of feedback on the C++ installation. The chipset driver I've noticed occasionally goofs off because the C++ file, I believe it's 2005 or some other version, is attempting to install. Sometimes it'll fail, sometimes it'll go through. And rather than just leave everyone in mystery and wonder, I just thought I'd go ahead and just download it, get it over with, do a reboot, and get that driver installed, the chipset driver. Once the chipset driver is installed and the hotfix is installed, I believe we should be all set to go. So this will probably take a little moment here. Let me just go ahead and not bore everybody with this process here. Though many of you may feel a little nostalgic, this is obviously something I used to do many times on any brand new or rebuilt Windows 7 computer I used to build here for myself, family, friends, and of course clients. All right, here we are after a quick reboot. Sp1 for Windows 7 is installed. So I'm going to go ahead and open up our trusty little folder here under the setup folder I created. And let's go on to the next process here. I'm going to go ahead and install this quick hotfix over here. And this is pretty vital in terms of drivers, I believe, in terms of updating the Windows certification for drivers or signatures, I believe. If you do try to install USB 3 drivers, even if it is the correct driver, it actually might be rejected or installed and not actually in use just for one reason or another. Basically, the signature is outdated or non-existent. This file basically updates those signatures and gets things going for you. I'm going to go ahead and reboot yet again. And then we'll go ahead and install that C++ installation and then get the chipset driver installed as well too. So this process obviously does take a little bit of patience. There's a number of steps to be followed. And as generations of Ryzen CPUs in this case have gone by, this process only gets a little bit more difficult here and there, but a little bit of patience, and of course with the help of a really amazing person that went ahead and created these custom USB drivers and other drivers for Windows 7 on new chipset motherboards and CPUs. This is all possible. So definitely a great thanks to him as well too. All right, that reboot is done. and over with. I'm going to go ahead and open the same folder again and install that file right over here, which you'll see more clearly. Yep, there you go. Visual C++ 2015 for obviously X24. We're going to go ahead and click on this here, install it, and get this going. This may or may not ask me to reboot. Guess we'll see in a moment. No, it looks like it didn't. So I think we should be all set. Next thing to install is going to be our chipset. So I'm going to go ahead and run over here. Chipset drivers and files are being extracted. And let's go. Oh, there's that little 2015 file there that you just saw a moment ago. And here we are. Looks like everything's working A-OK so far. So obviously the default installation over here, including the SATA driver, I'm just going to go ahead and click on install. The reason I picked the Chipset X470 motherboard to download this file from is because obviously if you go any further, if you pick other chipset-based motherboards, B550, X570, and other chipset motherboards available for Ryzen, for 3rd and 4th generation CPUs, you will not see the option from Windows 7. So basically, obviously, the chipset drivers are still being updated from time to time, even if it's based on Windows 7. So I went ahead and downloaded that. So obviously, you see this is done. I'm going to go ahead and give it a quick reboot, and then we're going to go ahead and try to install those drivers, particularly USB. I keep hearing the fans. You probably hear as well too every time this computer reboots. It's almost like my main PC is complaining, why am I doing this experimentation on her? But yeah, it's the only, this particular computer is the only one that has a 4th generation based Ryzen CPU at this time, at least. Some 4th generation Ryzen CPUs have been coming down in cost. So I may actually grab one for my second PC here. You will immediately see some things are being recognized, but obviously our keyboard and trackpad on this wireless keyboard is not one of them. So it's asking me to reboot yet again just because of the SATA driver. So let's go ahead and take care of that. A couple of reboots in this entire process I know can be a little tedious, and some of them could probably be sidestepped, but better to be safe than sorry. This is your initial setup, and even if it takes just a few minutes longer, might as well just go with the flow. Most information that I've been using on this computer is in the description below, but just to let you know, this is the MPG by MSI X570 Gaming Pro Carbon motherboard. And I believe it does have Wi-Fi as well too, even though I actually disabled it on this particular board. And let's go ahead and open up the folder yet again. Go ahead and bring up the device manager, and you immediately see there's a couple of things here that are missing, but it does actually see our processor. There she is. Oh, it's glory and beauty. So I'm going to go ahead and let's get some USB drivers installed over here. So let me open up the folder here. You'll see this is where our experiment chips drivers are. You'll see all these drivers for USB. Some other stuff here as well too. Let's go ahead and get this installed here. Obviously this is a manual installation, so you'll probably have to go ahead and pick stuff, but let's go ahead and try to lead its way to the driver. I'm gonna go ahead and open drive C. This is setup, Ryzen. Oh, looks like I already did play around with some stuff here. And let me see if I can actually just do it this way. Oh, there we go. Go ahead and install. And down there you'll see some stuff is installing, but not just yet. Let me go ahead and get the other two controllers updated as well too. There's another one. You'll also see that as soon as I'm doing this, some unknown devices are appearing. And this is actually intended, so I'll go ahead and explain that a little further. All right. Do you think the keyboard is working just yet? No, not there quite yet. So as you did notice, as soon as I installed the drivers for these things here, the USB 3.0 host controllers, these unknown devices appeared as well too. Let's go ahead and take a look. You immediately see now I'm using the same driver in the same location. Oh, some stuff is actually being recognized. So I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing to the other two. And I'll do it manually yet again. Browse, going into the same setup folder, the same Ryzen 5000 folder, and going onto the same USB controller folder over here. Yet again, another successful installation there. Going to do the same thing here because obviously it defaulted to the same place, and there we go. Check that out. The only thing left now is your Ethernet controller. Of course, we also do see a generic Bluetooth adapter, though it's, I'm just going to skip over it for the time being, but there are drivers for this as well too. It is Intel base. I'm pretty sure you can get your hands on it. The next couple of drivers missing is obviously a video card driver, and of course, well, your Ethernet driver as well too. But show you some magic over here. Check it out. Our keyboard is now working. I don't need to use the PS2 keyboard anymore. Hey everyone. So I just wanted to actually bring this up here, use some screen recording as opposed to having a camera just aimed at the monitor, which doesn't look so pleasant, but it does get the job done. But obviously, go ahead and have the option here to do this instead. You can actually see here, we do have pretty much all the drivers installed, including even network driver right over here. And of course your video card driver and all the processors for this Ryzen CPU actually does appear here as needed. Still didn't get to fix this little Bluetooth adapter issue, but I'm going to be working on that. Probably the least of my concerns at this time, obviously. But you can actually see here, in all its power and glory, the AMD Ryzen 9 5900X is indeed working in Windows 7 and obviously is working pretty well. Let me go ahead and bring up CPU-Z over here. You can actually see all the processes here in Task Manager. And here's some additional details on the CPU itself. Basically all the specs you'll expect to see from this particular processor, and of course the little logo right over here as well too. Go ahead and pull up the main board. You will see that this is indeed the X570 Gaming Pro Carbon with a little Wi-Fi obviously, and some other little details here as well too. One thing I definitely do want to make note of is the Pci Express Speed is set to 4.0, so you will definitely be seeing that impressive speed if you decide to put in a Generation 4 PCI Express and NVMe drive, M2 drive, into this little area just above the PCI Express slot where the video card goes. So that's something really impressive. One thing I actually like to go ahead and test out myself, but I don't have a 4th generation and M2 drive available with me right now to actually just wipe out and test out as well too. Some other little details here. I do have the memory running at a default speed in dual channel, and of course your little cheapy video card that I installed here. So this actually went pretty smoothly, but I will absolutely admit that it was not easy the very first time, especially when installing on the B550 chipset based motherboard. It's basically a learning curve and a little bit of a process to make sure everything's working correctly. Obviously finding out that I need that little Windows 7 fix-it, hotfix installation, and also the C++ installation that you saw earlier can also just cause another little issue or delay. So all those little things out of the way, this actually turned out to be a very smooth installation. I don't believe I really ran into any hiccups during this one. This is actually pretty much the first time I've actually tried doing it before actually trying to work out the kinks and then presenting it to everybody to actually see for themselves. So yes, definitely 4th generation 5000 class Ryzen CPUs does absolutely work in Windows 7. You can actually see here all the USB ports here. Looks like 2 more appeared, I don't know where, but whatever. Even do have the NVIDIA sound from the sound card, no big deal. Do have the Intel Gigabit Ethernet port right over here as well too. And other amazing little things here. Even have the SATA connection for the SATA SATA driver for the AMD board here. So you can definitely see how this process can be a little lengthy, definitely requires some patience. Obviously taking the SSD out of one computer into another, just back and forth to copy over files, can just be a bit tedious, but you do reap the rewards after this long process. It definitely does work out. So I know everyone's going to have a bunch of questions. Particularly the big question is why install Windows 7 on a 4th generation CPU. Right now this is just basically for the ins and outs and the experimentation as well too. I had the CPU, I had the board, and I had the ability and of course the knowledge over here that I'm sharing with everybody. Why not? Why not just give it a shot? Do I plan to continue using Windows 7 on this CPU, on this particular computer? Definitely not. I still do use a Windows 7 based computer as a secondary boot hard drive, I guess you can say. You just basically have to choose whether Windows 10, Windows 7, and that actually works out pretty well just for a reference. Eventually I may do away with that now that Windows 11 is coming out very soon, but again, just the amazing idea that it works out is, you know, many people have mentioned it just doesn't work since 1st, 2nd, 3rd generation Ryzen CPUs. Voila! It actually does work, as you can see here. Anyway, if anyone has any questions or comments about this process, by all means, please let me know. In reference for the information for the downloads, all that is basically in the description below. Feel free to grab any of those files there. They're all available for you. I have links there as well too to make this process much easier. Go ahead and download them all into a folder so they're easily accessible when you need to copy them over to your SSD drive or whichever hard drive you plan to install Windows 7 on for this particular generation Ryzen CPU. Now this method will definitely work with 2nd and 3rd generation Ryzen CPUs. It's definitely much more updated than previous videos as well too. And I do plan to make one more video with an entire process with everything and all the methods, very thorough, of how to go ahead and get this accomplishment done. Anyway, thanks again for watching. If you have any questions, please go ahead and leave a comment. Shoot a like and subscribe if you found this useful or just very entertaining for the most part. Take care, everyone, and as always, stay safe.